Gospel according to Luke and the Acts of the Apostles are two volumes of a single work by the same author. Each volume includes an account of the last encounter of the risen Lord with his disciples before he leaves them. The first reading in the Mass for the Feast of the Ascension is the opening of Volume 2, the Acts of the Apostles, and tells the familiar story of Jesus parting from his disciples after 40 days. The reading from the Gospel are the final words of Volume 1, and so they immediately precede the words we hear at the beginning of the Liturgy of the Word. But they contradict each other. Acts has Jesus appearing to the apostles for 40 days after his resurrection and then being lifted up. However, the Gospel presents the event as taking place on the evening of Resurrection Sunday in the presence of many disciples and speaks simply of Jesus parting from them. If we assume that Luke is reporting facts about the life of Jesus and the church, there is certainly a problem. Might it be that he had taken a break between writing the two volumes and had forgotten what he wrote in Volume 1 before starting to write Volume 2? After all, we too have the experience of not paying close enough attention to readings at Mass and missing connections. But how could Luke forget such important facts? On the other hand, and more likely, the differences between the two accounts might give us an insight into how to read Scripture. One of the mistakes that biblical fundamentalists make is to assume that when people wrote and thought thousands of years ago, they did so in exactly the same way that we do. They did not. So a fundamentalist might assume that something is literal reporting when it's actually an ancient writing style that introduces details not for the sake of accuracy, but as spurs to memory or thought. So, unless we want to say that Luke did not know what he was doing as he moved from writing the Gospel to writing Acts, we must admit that some of his information that we reflect upon today is meant to tell us truth rather than facts. There's a difference between truth and fact. Something can be truthful without being factual. For example, the two accounts of creation in the book of Genesis tell us the truth that God creates and considers the world something good. It assures us that our existence is not absolutely divorced from the concern of God. However, if we want the facts about the universe, we must go to scientists. On the other hand, something can be factual without being true. If truth be what is in accord with the will of God, then sin, injustice, and violence are not true, merely factual. And since we follow Christ, who is the truth, we confront, repudiate, and combat such facts for the sake of truth. So, if we admit that Luke is not trying to present facts in his different accounts, what is the truth he hopes to convey to us? The Gospel account, by having Jesus ascend to glory as an immediate part of his resurrection, stresses that the glorification of Jesus is an effect and part of the resurrection, not something separate from it, an add-on. And by having all the disciples there, men and women, Luke is affirming the missionary vocation of all the followers of Jesus. In the Acts of the Apostles, Luke's placing the ascension 40 days after the resurrection brings to mind the 40 years that the Hebrews wandered in the desert on the way to the Promised Land. In Scripture, 40 days, weeks, or years are not exact measures of time, as if we can assume that there were 960 hours between the resurrection and the ascension. The number means a long time, long enough for people to become what God intends them to be. And that is part of the truth that opens the Acts of the Apostles, the volume of Luke's work that presents the new community, the new people of God going out into the world to proclaim the good news. They are now ready to take up the mission of the Lord. Acts tells the truth about us. We, the new people of God, have been prepared for our vocation. We are the apostles. Christ has stepped aside so that we might step forward. The Acts of the Apostles begins with the ascension of Jesus. They continue with us.